Neither of the two political parties has shown any indication of political will and vision to fix the horrible public transport system with which this country has been saddled for 40 years and more. Good day. That's part of the thrust of the 62nd episode of the Frankly Speaking Jamaica podcast. Then there is Dr. Nigel Clarke and Marcus Garvey. And then Desmond Richards assesses the industrial relations climate. And Winnie Anderson Brown asks about the church and violence. I invite you to share and like this episode. And if you haven't done so yet, please subscribe. Remember, comments on the channel are always welcome. Finance Minister Dr. Nigel Clarke last week touched briefly on the Albatross, that is the Jamaica Urban Transit Company, JUTC. He pointed out that the government was shoveling another $7 billion into that bottomless pit, out of which, frankly speaking, we are not getting service or any value for money. To function properly, that is to say, to move people efficiently and with some decency, the JUTC needs to roll out 400 plus buses a day. It's down to fewer than 200 a day, and half of those are 10 years or older. Besides, the JUTC desperately needs major capital injection, competent management, a new ethos, and more useful security to prevent the wide-scale theft that's part of the culture there. But the JUTC, even were it to be fixed, and there is no indication that will happen shortly, that would not mean a solution to public transport in Jamaica or even the corporate area. We must stop pretending that the JUTC is the core of a public transport system for the country. Frankly speaking, it is not. The JUTC serves the capital city and parts of urban St. Andrew and St. Catherine, and there's a few buses in Western Jamaica. The larger block of people over the greater geographical area of this country are not served in any way by the JUTC. The vast majority of school children in Jamaica have never set foot on a subsidized JUTC bus. So, when the government gives $7 billion to help dig the JUTC out of the hole into which it is sinking, it is providing a subsidy for less than half of the traveling public, and surely nothing for the people in the rural areas. So, what about the other parts of the system? They are largely private, and most of it is found in the rural areas. Route, taxis, and buses bought by more than 40,000 individual Jamaicans. And they run without subsidy, without proper standards and supervision, and without order. Frankly speaking, the government continues to starve the public system, that is the privately owned part of the system, of resources, and gets away with it because these are poor Jamaicans who have made the investment in their taxes and buses. Besides, the system is used by poor, powerless Jamaicans in the main, about whom, frankly speaking, those who can do a little better care less. I know what I'm doing here is describing the problem, but it's a place to start, to make it clear, frankly speaking, that what's the scope of the problem and its solution. That even when the government brings in 200 electric buses over the next 3 years, that means nothing for the public transport system's efficiency. Frankly speaking, it's time that Audley Shaw or whoever succeeds him be ordered to apply some grey matter to designing a public transport system. And that's to be distinguished from the JUTC buses or the JUTC and taxis and buses getting about largely congested roads. That's a part of the system. And I'm coming back to public transport. Now, there's been quite a bit of analysis by the financial experts about the presentation of Dr. Nigel Clarke in opening the 2023-24 budget debate. I'm going to the other side of the finances. I think his comments on Marcus Garvey amounted to a tour de force. They came in that section of the speech where Dr. Clarke was rationalizing why the banknotes are to be changed, and where he stated that Garvey's image had dropped off completely from the much devalued currency notes and coins. I'd like to tell Dr. Clarke, though, that frankly speaking, Garvey should be on the $5,000 note. But that's another thing again. Dr. Clarke was audacious enough in suggesting that the audacity of hope, the face and intellect behind which is Barak Obama, who authored the book of the same name, could well have been the character of Marcus Garvey many decades before. Every school library should have the 5-minute section on Garvey by Dr. Clarke. Here on this podcast, we only have time for 2 minutes of the tour de force by Dr. Nigel Clarke on Marcus Garvey.
Sought to raise capital on the New York Stock Exchange for the Black Star Liner. I want you to think about this for a moment, Madam Speaker. Just think about it. 100 years ago, at a time when lynching was commonplace in the United States, in the South, when racial subjugation was an operating premise, and when half of the world lived under colonial domination, a poor black immigrant from Jamaica incorporated the Black Star Line Shipping Corporation. It was an enterprise, it was a company, and he incorporated it in Delaware. In 1919, he raised private equity, Madam Speaker, issued share certificates, and bought ships. He later sought to raise capital on the New York Stock Exchange. Madam Speaker, in the 100 years between then and now, how many Jamaicans have sought to raise capital on the New York Stock Exchange? When you answer that question, you understand the significance of Marcus Garvey. And you understand that his legacy is not just about black nationalism. I put it to you, Madam Speaker, just imagine the audacity. I put it to you, Madam Speaker, that the audacity of hope did not begin in Springfield, Illinois, under Barak Obama. Long before Marcus Garvey embodied that audacity and has been and will always continue to be, Madam Speaker, an inspiration to generations of Jamaicans, of West Africans, of Americans and Africans. And Madam Speaker, we are pleased to restore the Right Excellent Marcus Mosiah Garvey to his rightful place, center stage position on our.
To hear this, not from the usual suspects, brings even more value. This ringing endorsement of this visionary, accomplished entrepreneur, black intellectual internationalist Marcus Garvey. Dr. Clarke did justice to the name of Marcus Mosiah Garvey. Here now is Desmond Richards, journalist and founder of Rebel Radio Jamaica.
Let's take a trip down memory lane.
The country, you cannot keep the largest part of your labor force, which is the public sector workers, under austerity. What it does, it demotivates them. It makes them wonder, what am I working for and why should I put out effort? And when your income declines, and if any of you here are teachers and you realize that you can't take taxi to work anymore teacher goes down, results start to fall, and the country start to move backward.
Yes, that was Prime Minister Andrew Holness when he was seeking votes. But he seems to have forgotten all of those words now that he has the power. And this is not the first set of campaign promises that the Prime Minister has forgotten. Right? Now, I have two issues with the government wage talks. One, I believe that the delivery of service to the public should be part of the discussion, the salary talks with the workers. Those of us who have to do business in the public sector must be aware of how poor the service that we are getting. That should be part of the new wage discussions. And productivity. I see no argument. Neither have I heard any argument from the Ministry of Finance. How is he going to drive productivity? Now, one of the things we must remember, this $367 billion that is set aside for our salaries won't be available next year, So therefore, if we don't improve productivity, where is the money going to come from to run the country? The government has three sources of income. One is taxes, loans, and grants.
That was Desmond Richards. And now Winnie Anderson Brown.
Sometimes we have questions, not answers or suggestions, something that we need to look at, explore, and come to our own conclusion. This is one such week that I'm sharing this with you. Someone said to me, "Do you realize that the church helps to promote violence?" And I said, "Really? How so?" And I was reminded of the fact that people enjoy sharing how bad they were before they got saved. As a matter of fact, we have a saying, the viler the sinner, the richer the blood. And this whole idea of running down destruction broad road, where you share how horrible you were, how vile you were before you got saved. So that notion that it is okay to be vile, it's okay to be wicked, because once you are, then you are in a better position to claim your spot in the spotlight when you go to church. Now, I am not endorsing, I am probing, I am thinking, and I'm inviting you to think with me. Share your opinions. What do you think about this? I have never looked at it before, so I invite you to look at it with me, and together we can explore this topic.
That's the 62nd episode of the Frankly Speaking Jamaica podcast. Thank you for liking and sharing. And remember, please, if you have not yet done so, please subscribe to the channel. On behalf of Desmond Richards and Winnie Anderson Brown, I'm Franklin McKnight. Until then.